When the Soviets successfully launched Sputnik 1 in 1957, it was clear to everyone that the US was losing the space race. I mean, the US government was trying to downplay the launch by saying that they actually weren't in a satellite race, and some were even saying they weren't in any race with the Russians, but the public, I mean, it was clear to everyone in the world that they were in fact in the race, and they were losing it. It didn't help that 3.5 years later, the USSR launched the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin. Now, the US had no choice but to raise the stakes, so they announced that they will land a human on the moon. But that's easier said than done. The US, and honestly no other nation in the world, had a powerful enough rocket to achieve this goal, so they had to build it first. Thankfully, they knew a guy who could do it. Yes, I'm talking about Werner von Braun, the father of rocket science. The US brought him from Germany in 1945 among 1,500 other talented German rocket engineers. They already helped to develop the Redstone and Jupiter ballistic missiles, as well as the Jupiter-C, Juno 2 and Saturn V launch vehicles. But now they had to do something even more ambitious: design a rocket capable of sending humans to the moon. And after years of hard work of hundreds of thousands of the smartest people in the country, this was the result. Isn't it beautiful? Of course it is. It's a masterpiece. I think it's safe to say that this is one of the greatest feats of engineering, if not the greatest. Like, this rocket consisted of literally millions of parts, wires and nuts and bolts, but even with this amount of parts, it was still very reliable. Like, there were zero catastrophic failures. It was very reliable, very powerful, and very heavy too. Like, the first stage weighed 2.2 million kilograms. Yes, million. This is like the weight of 1,000 trucks. It's a lot. And most of that weight was fuel, actually. The stage itself had a weight of 137,000 kilograms, which is still a lot, but I mean, more than 90% of the total mass was fuel. By the way, the fuel tank of the first stage was ginormous. Like, it carried almost 800,000 liters of RP1 fuel. This is just highly refined kerosene. And liquid oxygen tank, which was sitting above, was even bigger. It carried 1.2 million liters of liquid oxygen. By the way, there was a problem with it. Well, not with the tank itself, but the lines that carried liquid oxygen to the engine, they had to be straight, because otherwise it might slow down the flow of the liquid oxygen. What's the problem, you ask me? Since they were straight, that meant they will run right through the fuel tank, like with kerosene, and engineers were afraid that it will start freezing outside the pipes, so they had to insulate them. But let's talk about the most interesting part, the engines. I'm not gonna dive deep too much into them, I think they deserve a separate video. But in short, the first stage had 5 F1 engines located in this configuration. The center one was fixed, while the outer ones were moving to adjust the position of the rocket. Those engines were very powerful, like they provided 34,500 kilonewtons of thrust at sea level. That's a lot. They were so powerful that they had to be ignited separately. Like, at first, the center one was ignited, then 2 outer ones, and then another 2, with 300 millisecond intervals. By the way, some people wonder why the first stage was painted like that, with these black stripes. It wasn't a stylistic choice, but actually, it was done so that it helped to control the roll of the rocket during the flight. Next, the second stage. It had 5 J1 engines in the same configuration as in the first stage, 1 fixed engine in the middle, and 4 outer ones that could move. However, instead of using kerosene as a fuel, it used hydrogen. Why? In short, because hydrogen is more efficient, and that's a good thing. However, its density is lower than kerosene. That means the same mass of hydrogen will require a much larger tank than the same mass of kerosene. The first stage was already huge, and if they had used less dense hydrogen, it would have been even bigger. That's why they chose kerosene for the first stage and hydrogen for the second and third stages. Okay, the third stage. This is interesting. Unlike the first and second stages, the third stage engines ignited twice. Engine. It had only 1 J1 engine. That's the same engine that was used in the second stage. So at first, the engine ignited to get the spacecraft into Earth orbit, and then it ignited for the second time to perform a translunar injection. Actually, if you're interested in how the mission went, I recommend you to watch my other video where I explain that in more detail. But in short, yes, the third stage engine ignited twice. Okay, what else? Oh, this thing. We didn't talk about it. So this is the launch escape system. I think it's pretty obvious why it was necessary. The astronauts were sitting literally on more than 1,000,000 kilograms of fuel. You can imagine what will happen if something went wrong. It will be catastrophic. So this is why this thing exists. In case something went wrong, it will pull the command module with the astronauts away from the rest of the rocket. It could be activated either automatically or manually by the astronauts. Thankfully though, it was never used. So yeah, Saturn V was a masterpiece. It was big, it was powerful, but most importantly, it was reliable. It never failed catastrophically. Yeah, it was an incredible piece of engineering.